Is he ready? Oh, sorry. Oops. Call to order this regular meeting of the Page County School Board.
Mr. Gabler?
Yes.
Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Dr. Painter?
Yes.
Sullivan Smith?
Yes.
Yes. Please pause for a moment of silence as we prepare for the meeting tonight. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Fox, do you have any agenda changes or additions?
Yes, I do. This evening, for item 3.02, I would like to amend it to remove the Shenandoah Valley Electric Cooperative Easement request and replace it with a discussion regarding school division property.
Okay.
So it's actually no longer an action item, it'll just be an informational item.
Info, school property.
Yeah, discussion regarding school division property.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the agenda as amended in a second.
Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Dr. Painter?
Yes.
Mr. Gabler?
Yes.
Sullivan Smith?
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Fox, approval of the FY23 budget adoption?
Yes, so thank you, Board. And we are here tonight to present you again, just like we talked about on Thursday night. This is just a version of where we are at this point in time. We do have a little bit of updated information for you, but for the most part, most of this you've already seen, we've discussed ad nauseum, but we're going to continue to discuss it, and then we will have to come back and make some amendments to this. But just a reminder again that the General Assembly has still not yet passed a budget. Once they do, it'll need to be forwarded to the governor, who can then approve it, amend it, or veto it. And at this time, we are still not sure when we'll get this. We don't know if there are ongoing conversations or if they're meeting. So we're trying to get that information, but do not have that information. So again, everything that you're going to see tonight and hopefully adopt will be based on the December 2021 governor's proposed budget. We just wanted to remind you of our ADM projections as we move into the budget, that this budget is based on 2,986 students. And that's using our ADM figures. And we've discussed this, how those figures are calculated. Just a reminder of where we are. We discussed this on Thursday as well. These are our budget priorities in terms of compensation to attract and retain qualified staff. There's the salary increase that includes a step, the certified classified scale salary adjustments. And then priority number 2 is those additional staff positions that are going to meet the ongoing needs of our students and improve our organizational efficiency. And then finally, the facilities upgrades, renovations, and expansions. In terms of our compensation adjustments, again, that 7% salary increase, a step for all applicable employees, that's coming at a cost of $2.171 million. Our classified scale adjustment that had those 3 major components, we're unbanding those steps or separating them so that each step has an increase as you move up the scale. We're implementing a consistent step across each of those scales. About 1% is the average. And then we're doing that adjustment for minimum wage, which is technically not due until January, but we feel it's important to start that now so we can remain competitive with our wages. So that's at a cost of $477,000. Those additional staff positions, though they come sort of in 3 different areas for the academic and instructional needs of students, the social, emotional, behavioral supports of students, and then organizational efficiency. And so the cost for those 8 positions altogether is sitting at $599,000. And just as a reminder, that includes salary and benefits. And then we had this in there for the electricity program. If we can get that additional teacher, we need some funds to get that room ready and provide that space for the students in anticipation of next year. So all of those things together, the salary increase, the step, the classified scale adjustment, the additional staff positions, and the facilities upgrades comes to a total of $3.2 million. So again, only difference in this figure for you tonight is we took out the health insurance, and we'll show you that in just a minute, what we've done there with that. So we're still looking at a need of, if we want all of that, $3.2 million. So here's our revenue by source. In terms of operating fund number 1 from what the state is going to be providing us, what we'll get from federal grants and other federal subsidies, other, and our local funding. So this is the number that we were presented last night with the Board of Supervisors meeting. And you do have, Ms. Sechrist has given you a copy of the draft resolution. Now, we will say that this copy is not the final copy because they did make an amendment to it before they approved it, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But the fund, total revenues for Fund 1 are just over $42 million. For Fund 2, which is our CIP, and remember that is hanging in the balance right now. If the Senate version of the budget gets passed or the governor's version, we're good. If the House version gets passed, we lose that $2.1 million. And then our food service fund. So we're looking at revenue in all of those categories at just over $47 million. So I'll stop there. Any questions so far or comments from Ms. Sechrist, Mr. Benson, or Dr. Johnson? You guys okay? Okay. This just shows you the local breakout of that Fund 1, how much is coming from the state in terms of support, how much from the Board of Supervisors and our federal funds, and then the other category. So right now, the state's funding about 62% of our operating budget. Our local Board of Supervisors is providing about 27% of that funding. So again, last night at their meeting, they did approve their budget and adopt a version, knowing that they likely will also have amendments to make. And so what we've shown you here, and I'm going to ask Ms. Sechrist to chime in on this as well. So the first column you see there, this is a little bit different than the last time we showed it to you. The first column that you see for adopted is what was adopted last school year, around this time, a little bit earlier, and that's what we have moved forward with this year. You guys recall a couple weeks ago, we had conversations about the Johnson Controls contract. The Board of Supervisors has now taken over that contract. So what they did was take that $600,000 out of our FY22, and it's been removed from FY23. So you see that difference from column 1 to column 2 is taking out that $600,000. Anything you want to add to that?
So that payment is something that JCI is something that we encumber through the year and usually pay in June. So because we wouldn't have that payment is the reason that they also removed it from, or chose to remove it from this year as well.
So then proposed for FY23, that's the figure we were presented last night. And that number is based on, they are funding us at a 5% raise so that we can receive our full state funding. So that number is about equivalent to a 5%.
Their portion.
Their portion, thank you, yes.
It's their portion.
Their portion, not the full 5%.
What is that portion? Half?
No, sir. Less than half. I could
Less than
calculate
half.
that for you, but it is,
Okay.
it is less.
To just make sure that the board of supervisors, what they approved of the 5% raise, it's their portion, is less, significantly less than the 5%.
Right.
Thanks.
So right now, that 675, that's the number we're working with moving forward. What was also said last night was that if we come back and the state has decreased our funding, they have said they will come back and increase our funding. So we just don't know where all that's going to land. So just the big asterisk on all of this is wherever we land with the state, it's going to change all of these numbers, not only for them, but for us.
Well, I appreciated Mr. Street, mentioning about getting the contracts out for the teachers, which lets us do that here. I appreciate him doing that.
Yeah, and I think, we don't need to lose sight that our staff are at a minimum going to get a 5% raise. Like, we know that tonight. We can say that with all confidence. And that's a big deal. And I think we need to celebrate that in the midst of all the other things. I think we don't need to lose sight of that. That's a big deal for our staff, and we're excited. So we are appreciative of that, to be able to move forward with confidence of that. So, so we've already talked through that. We talked through that. These are just the positions, and I just wanted to remind you of the rank order because we'll get to this slide. So last night, in addition to putting out a number for us so that they could adopt their budget, they also, as they approved this resolution, they made a recommendation, and it was approved by a 4-2 vote, that they move our funding structure from a lump sum structure to a categorical funding structure. And so we just wanted to share that with you tonight and let you know, where we are currently is we get a pot of money and then we kind of decide where it goes. We've shown you, we have those different areas like instruction, admin, and health that we put money into, and then we move money around as needed. So that gives us some local control of that money and how it's spent. If we move, and if this is final, that we go to categorical funding, every single area has a finite amount of money, and we can only spend it on those things in those areas. And if we want to move outside of those areas, we then have to go and request that. Or we have to request that we move from one category to another. So it constrains us in some ways because we don't have the freedom and the latitude that we'd like to have. And it makes it, the workload on our staff is going to be greater and the workload on their staff is going to be greater.
So walk me through that. I'm sorry, Mr. Goop.
When will you get that?
I was just going to ask, have we ever had this categorical funding format in the past? And how many other local school divisions do this sort of micromanaging technique?
So yes, we've had it here before, I think 2015, 2014. Yeah.
But one time, as far as but rarely. For like how long? A year or two? 1 year. 1 year. So it's rare.
It is rare, and I would say that there's probably not as many school divisions that have this type of structure. Most are lump sum.
So what's the point?
I don't know. We wanted to ask the question why last night, but the forum didn't necessarily present itself to ask that question. So as we follow up with Ms. Moeller and with the Board of Supervisors, we will ask that question.
When will you get their category? Like, when are you going to get
So
that?
we
You
actually
reach out?
provide them with those categories.
Okay.
So
And
once
they
we have a
approve?
state budget, then we create the expenditures. We would provide them with those.
Maybe we just need one category.
The state reporting would allow that. That would be okay. However, the issue does then become if we have to move money from transportation to O&M or from instruction to somewhere else, we have to basically do the resolution process to take it before them and ask that that money be moved every time that we need something reallocated to a different function. Instruction, admin, people transportation, technology.
And what does that entail? I mean, what, is that like a business plan you got to submit?
It's these things.
So it's the resolution where I do the whereas and
Okay.
read, so I have.
But
to
what's
do-
the backup behind those things? I mean, this is the final product.
What do
You got to
want
meet
to
with
get there?
Amity, I'm assuming, several times, or the,
Yes, Tyler Olson and I will
Tyler,
probably
okay.
become much closer if this is what is adopted.
okay. And do they know what kind of format they want these requests to come in?
They have not stated any of that, so
So they just passed a resolution
that,
and then,
what we heard last night was categorical funding and no other details of it.
One of the offshoots of that then becomes the purchasing, how proficient you are. Because you're waiting on permissions and you're waiting on the
Yep.
ability to order it and you're waiting on receipts to get back. This slows everything.
And the previous board of supervisors, not the current makeup, they were pretty good with that. When we told them we needed to buy like a bus or something like that, they were like, yeah, let's get this done. Now, this new group, I don't know. So,
But you only had it in one lump sum, too.
right,
Right.
right.
I mean, I can speak for the technology. Blake and I have had a situation where we've had 24 hours to respond to something.
Absolutely.
Because we've been able to, we found the only thing nationwide.
Yeah.
You know, when we were dealing with our network equipment and stuff, we asked vendors to hold it for 24 hours, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, Dr. Painter, to answer your question, I think one of their frustrations, and I'd like to take a minute to address it because I think it's important for our public to understand this as well, is as we've presented to them over this past year, they've asked and we've answered that we've had some vacant positions this year. But what I want to clarify is that even though that position may not be filled with a staff member, it doesn't mean that that full cost is then free to us to use in whatever capacity. So for instance, if it's a teacher, we still either have to pay for a substitute or we have to pay stipends to other teachers to take over those classes. Those kids don't just magically disappear, they still have to be taught. So there's not a net sum zero of that. So we use that money to cover those expenses. So we aren't recouping, you know, say $80,000 in salary and benefits for a position. Another example is we haven't been able to find school psychologists. So while the position is vacant, we have filled that need by using online vendors who provide those services. Those services come at a much greater cost than the actual employee. So for example, one school psychologist, and correct me if I'm wrong, has cost us an additional $45,000 this year. So while it may look like you could take 8 positions and multiply it times, say, $60,000 and get a number, it doesn't mean that we have $240,000 sitting with it not being touched or spent. Much of that money is already being encumbered in other ways to make sure we meet those needs of kids. So I think that's an important thing. I think that is a frustration on the part of the Board of Supervisors because they just see that as potentially as a pot of money that hasn't been used appropriately.
So how are you going to handle that when you say you lose a teacher, you can't find one, and you got to substitute or whatever? Are you going to have to go back to the board of supervisors and say, hey, we can't find this teacher, but we're going to substitute, and this is where all this money is going to go to?
If it expends our instructional category, then yes, sir.
So in the example of the school psychologist, where it would go over our budgeted amount, we would have to go and request that additional funding, wait on that approval before we could then approve that position to happen to move forward.
And not necessarily just additional funding, but they may have us then have to take it from another category. So we may have to have,
You have to move.
we will
Which is
have
what
to
you
move it. And so then we're still losing money somewhere. Every dollar that's not spent on instruction is spent on some way in operations. And so, you know, vice versa. If you take from one side, the other side is losing.
And some of the shorthand in this, particularly this year, you lose people. There's some principals that just say, hey, might want to go in a different direction now because of what's happened.
Well, and teachers too.
Teachers
Teachers,
as well.
when you have to pick up an extra class or every planning period is pulled because there isn't a substitute, that wears on you. It becomes a factor of burnout. And there are teachers who have decided they just don't want to do this anymore. And they can't. They just, for their own mental health, can't do it anymore. So yes, we have lost staff because
Experienced staff.
So in future too, and referring to what Mr. Benson was talking about, say we have to order something and we get it all approved. But it's like he said, you have this timeline. So now having to go through the process, and we have no guarantee, or at least I haven't heard that, where they're going to be finding all this and taking care of it in a timely manner, we're held hostage to really go forward and do anything. And that in itself, add in getting it here with, you know, deliveries and all that kind of thing. And unfortunately, either staff pays the price, meaning teachers, but more importantly, the kids are the ones that are losing out because of this. And isn't that sad?
And my reaction is similar. So, this categorical funding decision is a increase in scrutiny, an increased level of scrutiny. And it suggests, frankly, a lack of trust. And Dr. Fox and the central office staff have been nothing but transparent since she's arrived. So I don't understand it. It seems unwarranted, given the level of good faith effort that your folks have done. And that's all I'll say.
No, we appreciate those comments, and we reiterate that. If there is something that they have a concern about, we are happy to answer those questions. We're more than happy to provide the information. There are times, I'll say, there's a question that's come up about how much end-of-year money do we have? We're in the process of calculating that. We've shared that information, but we can't give a figure at this point in time. So there's some frustration with that, and it appears that we're not being transparent. But the reality is, we literally can't calculate that number right now. Is Ms. Seacrest working on it? Absolutely, to get a number, but that's just not a number that we can provide right now. And if we did, it wouldn't be an accurate number, so we're not going to do that.
One of the big impacts on final numbers is staffing after the last day of school. Because if an employee chooses to retire or leave us, which goes on throughout the end of May into June, there's payouts. We owe those employees vacation money, or we owe them for their summer pay that they won't be with us anymore, but would have been collecting. So that can amount to thousands and thousands of dollars. It's
A lot of
Sorry,
ramifications,
Did I interrupt you? Ms. Sullivan Smith?
The other thing that I'm sitting here thinking about, though, is in terms of special education, we also have to meet maintenance of effort, which means we have to spend more money on special education the following year than we did the previous year. So we're going to have to be able to find that money from the instructional fund. And so when those categories are set up, it's not just as simple as, you can only just put one more dollar in that category than you did last year. We're not going to meet it. And then there's penalties to be paid. You start losing money when you can't meet those requirements.
So when we go back, if I went back to the 62% state, 7% federal, 27%. So in categorical spending and accountability, of those percentages, is it done on the federal level? Is it done on the state level?
It's the whole thing, because our expenditures are all together. So yes, it's all one group. If they were to do it separately, it would be line item, and we definitely don't want that. So it is categorical funding as a federal funds, though, are kind of a wash because we spend them and then they reimburse us for them. So, and they're already by categories because of the titles and the way that they're given to us.
But that's not, you don't have to go back to the federal government and ask for
Right.
the money to be moved around.
Exactly.
You have to do that for the state.
No, sir. It's just moving
Still
it
local.
with our locality within our budget.
So that's where we are right now as of today. We're hoping maybe we can engage in some conversations to maybe have a different outcome before
Well, the
all
first
is
thing
said
I
and
would-
done.
Well, the first thing I would want to know about that is, what is the process? What is the work standard? I guarantee they haven't even thought about that,
But they don't have to do it.
because they don't have to do it. Exactly. That's something Tyler and you are going to have to figure it out.
And it might be on Amity to advocate for her staff.
And it's got to be
Yeah.
instant when it comes, found it out, put into place immediately. It can't be, well, we'll get to you in a couple of days or a week or whatever. They have got to follow
Before we get
through.
everybody together, right?
Exactly.
Potentially, it means meeting more often, too, right?
Yes, sir.
It was probably previously done on their board meetings, correct? But the resolutions would have been submitted at the board meeting,
Right,
which limits you then, constrains you to when.
right. So what Dr. Johnson was talking, we would
Twice a month.
potentially have a meeting and have to adopt a resolution here. Then it would go down to them the next week and potentially be adopted. And then
Yeah, so-
there's the process.
So work instruction and timing.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be critical. It just puts different demands on our staff to think through things differently, whereas now we have some flexibility to be able to say, all right, we need this, let's time it out for when we need it. Now we've got to add another step to that in terms of what's the approval process that might be required for it.
So this vote, who proposed it? So I know who to call first.
Okay, so let's, first off,
Yeah, I really want to know
I'm gonna
who
ask that
voted
question.
for.
so this has got to be amended, right?
Yes, the version you have in front of you
So I'm
has to be
assuming Mr.
amended.
Falls did that.
So Mr. Foltz initially proposed two things. One was he made a motion to remove around $166,000 from our budget, which is the assessment value of the house that's out here where currently our finance staff is. And that's what the agenda item is on for this evening, is to have a discussion about that. So there's a claim that's been made that that property belongs to the supervisors, and so he put a motion on the table to remove that amount of money from our budget. The second part of his motion was for this categorical funding. So they took the first part, it did not get,
It's 3-3.
oh yeah, it did
It was
go through,
3-3.
that's right, it was 3-3, so it didn't move. Mr. Guzzi then came back with the resolution and proposed this resolution with the amendment that they add the categorical funding in. That was then passed 4-2.
Come on, Keith.
So that's where we are right now, is this, we're waiting on the amended version, but that amended version will have added to it the categorical funding piece. And this resolution included the funding number that you saw.
The number that was proposed.
Yeah, the 11, yeah, that was proposed as of right now.
So,
so.
so is it in the county, from a county-wide standpoint, the landfill, sheriff's department, are they done the same way?
So when I asked that question, to some degree, yes, both are in some way, they're categorically done. Landfill has some line items to them. The sheriff's office is done by area. So in a way, it's similar to categorical funding, but the term categorical funding wasn't used. It was just, it's similar to it.
But there is before July 1, the chance it could.
Well,
not
we
be
know we have
categorical.
we know we have to make amendments because we're going to get different state numbers.
Yeah.
They're likely going to have some change. And they have said if our funding goes down, they'll increase. So the likelihood of us having to go back and work with them to request some amendments is a good chance. So our hope is that in the process of those conversations, we can talk through what frustrations led to them feeling that they needed to move towards categorical funding.
Question on the categorical vote. It was 3-3 tie.
No, that was 4-2.
The first
The
one was
first
Tie. It was 4-2 for it or against it?
4-2 for passing the resolution with the amendment that categorical funding be in place.
The first one that included the property was 3-3.
Gotcha.
I mean, and as we've seen this year, they can come back at any time and amend what they want. I mean, they amended our local match in March to remove the JCI contract. So, I mean, really, they could do that.
And we
at
helped
any time.
them by doing that.
Yes, ma'am, we did.
Yeah, they received a better refinancing rate and
They-
saved some money.
They approached us about that, and then they are also
So we're
now
just waiting to
receiving
get our
that.
back scratched.
Any other questions on this slide? So we just wanted to, and again, can't put enough asterisks on things this year, but this is where we currently stand. So with the numbers that we have as of tonight, our current revenue is just over 42 million, as we showed. Our proposed expenditures, including those priorities of the salary and compensation and the positions, just come in over 43 million. The difference there is just under $1 million. So this is new information for you tonight. Our health insurance, we are very, very fortunate. Our health insurance came in at a very good rate under where we actually saved money. So we need to celebrate that too, because that doesn't happen very often either. So what you see there is if you recall, we originally had a 10% increase, as that's normal standard budgeting process. That came out to be about $530,000. In discussions with the health insurance, we are going to save $175,000. So what that means for our staff is there's no increase to premiums. So that savings is going to be applied across the division to every employee. But our employees who receive health benefits through us won't see any increase in their premiums. And that's a win too, because we were anticipating potentially having to increase those premiums because of an increase in cost.
Does that get them to a 5.5% rate?
I was gonna say, that helps the raise a little bit, right?
So if you take those two things together in our budget, that gives us a savings of just over $700,000. So that's a good thing. Like, there are some nuggets of hope
Very
here.
good.
So that leaves us overall with all of the things we want in our priority list with only a $200,000 gap. So depending on where the state lands, and we're optimistic that they'll come to a compromise between those two, we may be just fine and be able to get our full 7, our step, our classified, and all of those positions that we want with the current level of funding that we've been provided by the Board of Supervisors. So I
But
think
no
that's good
sense of
news.
when we'll know that will.
That's the frustrating part, is we haven't even been given an update, like to say they're talking. So it's been radio silence from, not only from the Richmond, but from the Virginia Department of Ed as well. We haven't heard anything. So again, this is just the final slide in terms of what we're going to ask you to be adopting tonight is a budget of $47,832,188. And again, that Fund 2 is a separate line. We'll have to wait to see where the state goes, so we will have to come back. If we get that 2.1 million, we'll amend our budget to include that.
And last year, you guys will remember that we created that fund too, so it'll all show up separately in all of our reporting and everything that you all are given. If we were to receive any capital improvement monies from the state, they will be separated so we can see them and track them.
Then we're gonna upgrade the finance house, right?
She's trying to give me a heart attack. So in terms of next steps, we also want our staff to know, and we'll share this information with them tomorrow, provided everything moves forward with approval tonight. We do want to get our contracts out, so Dr. Johnson and his team with Ms. Seacrest and her team will begin processing those for distribution on Tuesday, May 24th. Staff will need to then digitally sign those and submit them by Friday, the 27th. And we are writing those contracts with the 7% salary increase, with the step, and with the adjustments to the classified scale. And then again, finally, just with the state budget, until we have those numbers, we can't move forward. So even though you're going to adopt those positions tonight, we're not going to post or move forward on any of those positions until we get the final state budget. So the only thing really that's going to move forward as of tonight is the contracts.
Which is good.
Yeah, that's a very good thing. And again, we're grateful that we got that funding and that commitment from the Board of Supervisors to be able to do that, because we really would jeopardize losing some staff if we couldn't do that. And then every budget presentation that we've done this year, we started with what's our why and we end with our why of our kids. And I just want to remind everybody, that's what this is about. This is not about us versus them. It's always supposed to be about our kids. And I know you all are there and focused on that. And I just ask that everybody in the community and at the Board of Supervisors, that we continue to be focused on the kids. That's what it's about. Are there any questions? Okay. So we would request tonight then that we adopt this version for our FY23 budget moving forward, knowing that there'll be some pending amendments to come.
7%.
Not at all, man.
Ms. Chairperson, I make a motion that we adopt the budget presented, or as presented tonight.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gubler and a second by Dr. Painter to accept the FY23 budget as presented.
Dr. Painter. Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Thank you all. I think that'll reassure our staff. It gives us the ability to move forward with those contracts. And again, we can make amendments as needed. If you have concerns, we can certainly come back and amend them.
3.02, information on discussion regarding the school division property.
Yeah, so going back to our conversation about what Mr. Foltz brought up last night with regard to, I'm just going to call it the finance house, because that's what we call it. So it's the property out here at 729 West Main Street. There was a concern brought up that there was an agreement between the Board of Supervisors and the school board years ago that that property would be returned to the Board of Supervisors. And that because they wanted to use it for their emergency services. We have started looking into that. And what we've provided on this sheet for you is just some basic information about some of the Board of Supervisors members were not aware that that was actually being used for our staff. And it is. Right now we have Ms. Seacrest and her team are over there. So we have 5 people currently upstairs in a 3-bedroom house. We use the kitchen where the coffee machine is. And then downstairs in the basement area is some storage, and all of our HR records are there. So that building is being used by our division. If we were to have to vacate that, I'm not sure where we would put those staff members. We just had a conversation the other day about having to move some things. And there is no more room in this building. We would have to add on to this building.
Not just the staff members, though. I would assume the documents you keep
Yeah.
there need to be kept.
Yeah,
For a
they're
lengthy
secure,
time,
safe,
too.
you know, yeah.
And before that, it was your entire sped department
Yeah.
because they couldn't fit over here.
Yeah, so somebody of our team has to be over there because there's just not enough room in this building. And at one point, it was also rented out. The top portion was rented out, the bottom was kept for records. So this property was back in January of 2007. The property was bought by the school division for $149,000, $149,900. And it was bought using Virginia lottery funds. So this was when lottery funds were directly sent to the schools. That changed in about 2008, 2009. So it was purchased using lottery funds. So what we're in the process of doing is investigating this claim that there was an agreement or a vote or a resolution between the two organizations to return that property to the Board of Supervisors. Right now, we can't find anything in a preliminary review of our board minutes. We can't find where there was a vote. We can't find, the only thing we've been able to find right now is information about 2007 when it was bought. There's information that's been shared with us that it was around the time of when the Health Sciences building was being built at the Tech Center. And that building was built using arbitrage money, which was the interest earned on the loans for the 2 new high schools. There was enough money in there. There were a number of different projects that were done around 2014, 2015. One of them being to build that building. There was repair to Shenandoah. There was some roof work done, about $1.3 million in total. So around that time is when this conversation apparently took place, and the agreement apparently was that if the Board of Supervisors pay for the tech center, then the school board will give them the house. So again, right now in our preliminary review of the minutes, and we're going to do a deeper dive so that we can say to you with 100% certainty, there is no vote, there's no resolution, there's no documentation that that occurred. Right now, we can't say that to you, but there's nothing in our first review that in our minutes that shows that that agreement was made official through any kind of vote, either through us or them.
What's the address?
720.
Well, according to the Page County GIS, owner's name, Page County School Board. So it's in there
Yeah, so we did
with a picture.
talk with Mrs. Brubaker, or I've emailed Mrs. Brubaker to do a title search so that we can confirm.
Transfer date 3/26/2007.
Yep, that's the document that we have.
149.9.
Yeah, it was approved in January, and then the site was closed on March 26th. So we want to know, that we own the title to it. And what I think the other question is, if it was bought with lottery funds at that time that were school division funds, That in a sense means that it is our property. Now, Ms. Moeller did share that there were some upgrades made to it that the Board of Supervisors helped pay for. So, there is some equity in there as it became a facility for us, just like any upgrades we make to our facilities, our appropriating body is providing us with those funds. So that's where we stand with that today. We just wanted to give you an update on that to let you know, because that conversation was public last night. It's was presented that we aren't honoring an agreement that was made. And at this point where we are today, we don't believe that that was a formal agreement, but we will confirm that for you all by doing a more thorough review.
First of all, I want to say I appreciate your all's due diligence in researching this. But I also want to say that it disappoints me that a single member can bring up a claim that's not based on fact necessarily, and then creates a large workload for us. And that's very dismaying.
Considering what we're here trying to do, which is, like you said up there, our why is the kids, this definitely takes the focus.
It's not like we've been caught doing anything illegal.
That's true. That's true.
Well, I just don't want our public, I don't want our school community and our citizens who pay their taxes to support our schools to think that we've done something untoward, that we went into an agreement or there was a formalized agreement and we didn't honor our side of that. If indeed that ends up being what was happened, then we will honor that agreement and we'll get Ms. Sechrist a tent and figure out, I'm kidding.
It's gotta be like a 15 person.
No, I'm kidding. But I don't want there to be out there any misconception that we did not do something that we were obligated to do. So we're going to investigate it.
We've had 2 meetings with the Board of Supervisors since February, and not one time did that ever come up, if it was a concern.
It's an
But
opportunity.
I don't think Mr. Foltz was there, though. Since he's the one brought it up. He
You're
wasn't
right,
there
you're
for
right.
meetings.
But
But it
was
could have
on
been
the school
brought up.
board at the time.
It could have been brought up by someone else.
And asked in a different.
If it had been shared with the rest of the Board of Supervisors.
But I think the accusation, it was an accusation. Yeah, you can parse it however you want to, and I'm cool with that. It was an accusation that something was done with a vote in a proper process, and we did not live up to our end. And that's an accusation. That's a pretty serious accusation. And I hope we're sending this to the Board of
We will.
Supervisors.
We will. What we're going to do is the couple of things, and we've mentioned a couple of them tonight, the frustration about the end of the year funds and that process, this and, what was the other one?
The savings due to vacant.
Yeah, the vacant positions. Those are 3 bullet points that we're going to send information to Ms. Moeller and to Mr. Weekly to make sure that they have the accurate information so that as they move forward, we've been asking all along, if they have questions or they need clarifications, please get them to us and we would make sure that we provide them with that information. And we have, when they've asked for it, if we have it. Like, for instance, they asked for how much do we have in savings this year? We can't answer that question right now, but as soon as we can, we'll be happy to provide that information, and we communicated that to the board. So I just, again, we can't have any more of an open process than what we're trying to do. And we just hope that in the future we can both come to the table and understand that that's what we're about. We're not here to misuse funds. We're here to make sure those funds get funneled to the kids and our staff have what they need to do for kids.
And if this was voted on, it would have been voted on by both boards.
Yes.
Well, and
Something
Mr.
like this.
And Mr. Foltz is all over this thing.
Who is?
Mr. Foltz,
He seconded the
From the time
motion to
period.
purchase
from the
it.
time period. So maybe his recollection is.
Well, we'll provide in writing, like you have on your sheet, you have from the January 2007, you have the actual, that's from the minutes, taken word for word from the minutes.
Good.
So as we find a reference to something, we will make sure that that's documented in this final document as we continue to grow this.
And I think I'd like to point out too, appreciate Mr. Guzzi, Mr. Stroop, and Mr. Weekly voting against that. I felt it was a bitter move. There's some bitterness there. And facts will help solve some of that for him, I hope. And if we've done something wrong, we'll make it right.
Absolutely. If it turns out that we find that there was a vote, then absolutely, we'll do what we need to do. to make it right. But at this point, as of tonight, again, this point in time, don't have that information to say that that happened.
And we've checked, I know myself, I checked with several former board members, found out what the sense of it was. I forwarded to you and looked into this thing, and I apologize to you. We've had students waste your time. We've had your own people in the school system waste your time. We've had parents waste our time, and now we've had a board of supervisors waste our time. Your time.
Agreed.
And it should be about instruction. And I hope one day that you'll get into the thing. And not that you're not doing it, but you can really get into making our school system better.
Absolutely.
I mean, this
No,
is-
I don't disagree with you. We need to be focused on the right things, and we
Yep.
get pulled sometimes.
Yep.
But I will say I'm very fortunate to have a strong team that supports what we have to do. And so when pieces, if I can't pick them up or Ms. Sechrist can't, somebody else will pick them up.
It's good to have history too, because I mean,
Yeah.
I think it was mentioned they wanted to use it for a rescue squad. And then, talking to parole board or was it probation office
Is what I remember.
is what you remember.
So that's
So
changed
it,
over time.
it changes, right. That's why you document and you have meeting minutes.
Again, I just go back, the disappointing fact is, if this was known by any other members prior to last night, why did that not come out before last night? You can't sit on questions
Pick up
like
the
that.
phone, call Antonio.
Absolutely. And, communication,
I'm not so sure everybody knew what was going to happen.
that
From
it
the
shouldn't have
responses
come.
that I saw from everybody,
And the bottom line is, and that's probably true, all the more reason it shouldn't have gone any further. It shouldn't have been allowed to have been said the way it was said, and I didn't hear it, so I don't know. But it's just disappointing, again, communication. All you gotta do is pick up the phone, call, or whatever, ask the question instead of trying to make
Well,
it look like.
but I know me personally, Mr. Foltz has brought up that building and whatever, and that was more of a conversation with him and the previous administration. Nothing I could do about it. And I think other people know about the issue as well. But now, you're right. It's a simple phone call.
Well, my hope is we can dig enough
Yeah.
to put it to rest, that
Yep.
it's one way or the other, and then we can all move on from it. And I gave you guys a copy of my comments, because I did speak at the board, at their public comments, and I gave you a copy of that because and I know my team agrees with me that at some point, we've got to move forward. We've got to be able to let go of some of the things that have happened, whether it's them or us.
Absolutely.
We've got to move forward and do our due diligence, put things to rest, and then let's move forward and work together to do what we need to do. We can't continue to harbor things. We've just got to be able to move forward.
But it's interesting, though, the 2015, the 1 year that we did the categorical accounting was in between the 14 and 16 in the school board. Interesting. Don't know what that means, but
It's also the same time, because enmeshed in all of this is the conversation about the Johnson Controls contract, which has come up again and again from the Board of Supervisors as a concern. So, well, thank you. That's all I wanted. Just wanted to give you guys an update tonight, and we'll continue to update you.
Can I have a motion to go into closed session?
Yes. Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1 pertaining to the discussion, consideration, or interview of prospective candidates for school board employment, appointments, transfers, resignations, retirements, discipline, and Section A2 for discussion of disciplinary matters.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Sullivan Senior and second by Dr. Painter to go into closed session.
Yes.
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 Yes.